There was another study that was done in 2006, and the country went through quite an economic change. And since that time, as did the state of Delaware. Can you compare and contrast where Delaware was, say, in 2006?
Despite the fact that in this study, the period that we were looking at was during literally the midst of the Great Recession. And if you look at the numbers nationally, which I'll talk about in a moment, the numbers really dropped. And it had primarily to do with lack of audience spending. Not the organization spending, but the audience spending. People were staying at home. But what happened in Delaware was that it stayed the same. 6 years ago, the total economic impact, this is easy for you don't have to remember another number. The economic impact was exactly 142.3 million. Of course, it was off by a few change, a few 100,000. It wasn't exactly to the penny the same. Completely different study, but the same result. Now, before we feel too great about that, because, there is a part of this that's really terrific. The terrific part of it is that despite being in a recession, you were able to stay even, stay level. Whereas if you look at your colleagues in other states, they definitely took a setback. And certainly in some major cities, they took a setback and had everything to do with audience spending. But what I think is important to look at is more details under that number. And specifically, what I would say is that if you look at the national numbers, most economic impact studies for those states and cities, it's about equal. Organizational spending is about it's about 45% of the impact, and audience spending is about 55%. But in Delaware, there's something very unique going on. In Delaware, organizational spending makes up 70% of the total economic impact, and 30% is made up in audience spending. And that's not quite exactly the way it was 6 years ago. It had a different balance. Mm-hmm. And when I dug deeper into the numbers, what I found is that there was a drop of approximately 300,000 attendees in the year 2010 of people attending arts performances or going to museums or things like that in 2010. Now, the other thing that I didn't mention is that when we did these audience intercepts, there's usually one dedicated person talking on behalf of a group that's attended. The average group is about 2.5 people. So when I say 300,000 people less, it's really closer to 1 million less people who attended performances. And that is primarily made up of local people. People within the state went to arts events less. Now, one could say, well, wait a minute, you just said the economic impact stayed the same. If we had such a big loss, where's that coming from? What you did really well is you attracted out-of-staters. Out-of-staters spend a lot more money than in-staters. The average in-state attendee spends about $17.50 per event per person, in addition to their ticket price. And that's exactly at the national average. But out-of-staters spend about $55 in this state, whereas the average nationally is only $39. You increased your attraction of out-of-staters coming into the state during that recession period. But you really dramatically lost your local attendance.
So even though the numbers were comparable, and because they're comparable, we're really doing better because we stayed the same.
Yeah, but I would not want to rest on laurels because there's a bigger story underneath here that really needs to be addressed.
About local attendance.
Yeah.
So in theory, if one can attract more local attendance, we could really move that percentage.
You're looking at a growth explosion here.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
Delaware can do, in the next study perhaps, increase its numbers on that audience attendance and get up there where other organizations nationwide are on average, where it's almost half and half. Their impact is half coming from audience spending, half from organizational spending, where as opposed to 70-30 in Delaware, if they can increase that audience spending, you'll have a higher number of jobs. Right now, the full-time equivalent jobs is a little bit less than the national average for a size, for a state and population this size. But that has everything to do with that audience spending.